Hello, friends, and welcome to the latest edition of The Boot Room, the show where we look ahead to Ipswich Town's upcoming game. This weekend, it's Portsmouth at home. Mark Heath, Andy Warren to break that down for you. And Andy, every week when we do this, I start this by saying, it's a big game. But it really is now. 9 games left. Town have really got to be pretty much perfect to have a chance of getting into that top 6. Pompey come in red-hot form, like Town themselves. This, my friend, is a big game, isn't it? How are you feeling?
I'm really looking forward to this one. I think there's a really good kind of feeling around the club heading into it. 25,000 crowd expected again. 2 of League One's big guns, both with the same objective of kind of forcing their way in from the outside, both with a real head of steam behind them, playing well. What's not to like? This should be a really interesting one this weekend.
Absolutely. And of course, the narrative going into the game, or the talking point going into the game, has been injuries, sadly, since that win on Tuesday. And we've been wondering just how many of Town stars were going to be missing tomorrow. And we just had a little update. We've been speaking to Kieran McKenna at the press conference, and he has actually given us an update on the injuries. So do you want to let people know what the damage is, as it were?
Yeah, it's a very thorough update. We wondered which way McKenna would go with this, and he's bared all. So sadly, George Edmondson, his season could well be over from this point on. It is obviously the middle of March. He's got an ankle ligament problem. That's going to be a significant number of weeks on the sidelines, and it sounds like it's touch and go for any more, whether there's going to be any more football in him in what has been a really good first season. Maybe he'll be around for the playoffs. Who knows? But but his season could well be over from this point, which obviously means Cameron Burgess steps up. We'll talk about more about him in a minute. The other one was Sam Morsey, the captain, as well as Edmondson. He limped out of the game with Lincoln on Tuesday night. He had a hamstring problem, but he's trained today. Did almost all of the session, and there seems to be a belief that he's should be good to go. Good to go for this one at the weekend, which is obviously really important as well. Wes Burns also trained today, but didn't quite manage as much of the session as Morsey did. He is in the frame for this game, but will be assessed. I was going to say obsessed. he will be obsessed tomorrow. No, he'll be assessed in the morning. So hopefully Wes Burns is available, and Luke Wolfenden's was nothing more than a knock. So all week we've been worrying about, should Tyreek Backinson play in the middle of centre. Didn't need to worry about that. McKenna said by Wednesday morning he knew it was just a knock. So Wolfenden's good to go.
Superb. Of those injuries, in terms of the 2 main ones, we were expecting Emerson and Morsey. In terms of their value to the team, I guess if Morsey does play, that's probably the best case scenario, isn't it? Of the 2, you'd probably rather have Morsey playing than Edmondson, because there's a ready-made replacement for George.
Yeah, it's tough to lose either of them. They're both kind of pillars of this team. But if you were picking one, you would probably just about pick the captain, Sam Morsey, because Cameron Burgess is kind of a ready-made replacement to come into the side. We'll see how he gets on there. But Morsey, we've discussed Morsey all throughout this year, the start of 2022, about what happens when he's not around. We saw it for a 4-game stretch and never really landed on a proper answer, I don't think. So hopefully he's good to go in this one, and for the rest of the season as well. That'll be a big plus.
Yeah. Shall we talk about the team then? Obviously, Morsey and Burns, late decisions, so they clearly are maybe carrying a little knock or 2. Do we risk them, Andy? This is a huge game. Portsmouth at home. There's now 3 straight games, which could pretty much decide whether Town get into the top 6 or not. Is it worth risking? If someone like Morsey's got a slight knock, is it worth risking him in this game for everything we've just said, how important he is? Or would you be tempted to play the long game and maybe sit him out and have him definitely 100% fit for the 2 games and the games to come after that? How would you approach it?
I'm not sure there's enough of a long game to play here for Town. I think I'd maybe handle them both slightly differently. Morsey is somebody I don't think either of them are going to be that keen on the resting risk, sort of managing the risk side of things. Morsey in particular, he's missed enough football for Ipswich this season. He'll want to play, and I'd play him. Burns, it depends how severe these knocks are. Look, if it's like they're 50%, no, you don't risk them. If they're fit to play, but you're questioning it, I'd play them. I'd play them both. It's a big game. You need the points here and now. Otherwise, the long game's no good to you. Burns has maybe got a more sensible potential replacement in Kane Vincent-Young, who's back in training and could play. So maybe you think differently there. But in terms of Morsey, if he's in any way good to go, I'm playing him.
You're playing him, and I'm sure he'll want to play, like you say. Let's look at your team then, Andy. There it is. No real surprise in the back four. They've been pretty solid. Obviously, Burgess comes in for Edmondson, and you've got there Burns and Morsey in midfield. Do you want to talk about the rest of it? Shall we start actually with Burgess? Because the last time we saw Burgess start a game, he was torn to shreds by League Two strikers in that FA Cup defeat at Barrow, that real low point of Town's season. Have you got any concerns about him coming in and playing that role? I know he's played it before. You feel like he's a pretty good replacement, though?
I've got no concerns about him. Do I think there's going to be a bit of a drop off from Edmondson? Yeah, not just in terms of him coming into the side, but in terms of just breaking up that unit that's been so solid. But in terms of you're bringing in a very experienced kind of League One campaigner to a 3-man backline, so. We've seen some things that that Burgess struggles with. If you can kind of pin him and turn him, you can have some real success against him that way. But we've also seen some real pluses to him in terms of his aerial ability, physical side of it. So in terms of a replacement coming in, I'm not sure you're really going to have much of a better option than Cameron Burgess. He's not George Edmondson, and it's going to take some getting used to. But I don't think it's a reason suddenly to start panicking too much.
Okay, well, the back eight then are pretty much set in stone, aren't they? Burgess comes in for Edmondson. As ever, the chat is around who starts up front. It's always that embarrassment of riches. And you can see there that you've gone for Aluko, Selena, and Caden Jackson, who now appears out of the blue, out of the wilderness, to be Town's #1 striker, which is something that just a few weeks ago would have been fanciful. Now it's actually fact. Talk us through your thoughts on that front three.
Well, he's scoring goals. He's playing with confidence, and if this was a horse race with the other Ipswich strikers, he'd be ahead by a neck at this point. He's kind of come from the back and is kind of pushing himself ahead. It's the same front three that started on Tuesday night. Played a really good first half and were ticking over really nicely, creating chances. Played with some intensity. Aluko, obviously, we saw had a really good game, standing ovation before coming off. Why change it?
Fair enough. Which leaves Town obviously with a very strong bench as well. How attacking do you go on the bench? Because there's loads of forward options you can have on the bench. You need the odd defender though, don't you, to be able to step in?
Yeah, well, defenders are dropping like flies. So in terms of centre back options, if there's going to be a centre back on the pitch, it's on the bench. Sorry, it's either going to be Elkenbag or Albi Armin, who Kieran McKenna discussed today, has been training with. They've both been training with the first team over the last few weeks. Baggett has been exclusively really training with the Ipswich first team. So he would be the next in line if anything were to happen to those back three. But we've seen them. Burgess has been an unused substitute on the bench for pretty much the entire time under McKenna. Be interesting. It would be interesting to see whether he goes for a centre back on the bench, and it will be Baggett, I'm sure, if he does. But look, the bench on Tuesday night had Joe Pigott, James Norwood, Macaulay Bonne, and Connor Chaplin on it, and I can't see any of them dropping out of the 18 for this game. So it's going to be a strong old bench again.
That's an obscene bench for League One, Andy. That's almost unfair, that sort of backup to bring off the bench. So that's the team, that's the bench. What about Portsmouth? What are we expecting from Portsmouth? We know Town tonked them earlier in the season, but this is a very different Portsmouth that come to Portman Road. There's tons of hashtag narrative in this game. The Cowley family obviously have links to Town. You've got the Michael Jacobs thing, the Joe Morrell thing, the Checkbook FC thing, the game from earlier this season. Whatever way you look at it, this is a fascinating game. And Portsmouth come in just like Town, banging form. They've actually won 6 of the last 7 games, Portsmouth. They do have actually slim pickings. I think they're down to 13, 14 first team players to pick from, but they're doing very well regardless. One slight thing to mention is their leading scorer, Marcus Harness, is suspended, so he won't be playing. But what kind of game are you expecting from Portsmouth?
You mentioned that they've won 6 in 7. They've averaged 3 goals a game over those 7. So you kind of a time when Town are maybe a little bit patched up at the back, finding their feet there. A team coming in who score goals. There's threats all over the pitch. You've mentioned a few of them there. There's others that we know about. We've seen before, like Tyler Walker. Loves playing at Portman Road. He loves celebrating goals at Portman Road. We've seen him do that before. George Hurst is scoring goals, has been substituted while on a couple of hat-tricks recently. Ronan Curtis is a player that scores goals. Aidan O'Brien. So it should be a really good game, like 2 front foot teams, knowing that neither of them can really afford to lose this game, which... Sometimes you might say that statement and you might think, well, it'll be cagey then, and it'll be 2 teams that are 2 teams that are happy to draw because they know that they can't afford to lose. But I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I think it'll be 2 teams here intent on winning, and that has the makings of something really, really quite entertaining. There's a new phrase in Town, by the way. You mentioned Checkbook FC. There's a new one. Danny Cowley's used in the lead up to this one. Recruitment Galacticos of League One.
Nice. I like it. That brings us perfectly on, actually, to a player that Town pretty much had recruited, Andy. He was pretty much a Town player by the shouting. And then suddenly Michael Jacobs was sent back to Pompey because Town decided to sign Kyle Edwards instead. And Jacobs has gone on from being on the fringes of the Pompey side to being a really important part of that side and a bit of a fan favourite this season, a bit of a talisman. He's been injured recently. And we're not sure whether or not he'll play tomorrow. There's a bit of an update, wasn't there, from Cowley earlier this morning?
I think he's trained today after missing 5 games. So, given that you're right, they're down to 13 or 14 senior players. That screams putting someone on the bench that's only just come back to training for me. So, yeah, Michael Jacobs could be that man. He could play in a variety of positions as a number 10 potentially. Can play wide, which is where Town we're looking to bring him in for. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one. He was here. He was in Suffolk. He'd done everything, terms, medicals, all of that. And then Town got wind that Kyle Edwards was available, and very quickly they were like, okay, this is the one we really want to go for, and off they went, and the rest is history. But yeah, he's a potential hashtag narrative coming off the bench in this game, I would guess.
Yeah, if he gets on, you'd imagine he'd be champing at the bit to do some damage and punish Town for the way they treated him. Right then, predictions time, Andy. We've got the classic irresistible force in Pompey's attack meeting the immovable object, which is the blue wall at Town's back, albeit with a new man playing for Edmondson. How are you feeling about this one? Can Town continue that defensive solidity? Are Portsmouth going to capitalise on Burgess being in? How are you seeing this one playing out at Portman Road?
When we've discussed this game earlier this week on podcasts and various other things, I've kind of felt like I was maybe going against my better judgment by predicting an Ipswich win. But my better judgment has shifted a little bit, and I'm now a bit more firm in that. I think Town could win this game, and if they do, I think it will be 2-1.
Do you think Town will concede for the first time in about 4 years? It feels like 2-1. You're saying. I'm going to go 2-0 again. I fancy a 2-0. Town are playing so well. Obviously, Pompey are playing well at home. Portman Road, that back 4. Fingers crossed, Burgess will do the job. I'm going to go for the clean sheets continuing. 2-0 Town. Andy's saying 2-1. That's our predictions. Hopefully we're right. If you're going, enjoy the game. If you're not, follow it all with us. Andy, Stu and Ross will all be there. And we'll catch you next time on the next Boot Room.